Okay, cool. Hopefully everybody is watching us. I can't really tell if y'all are here there or not. But hello from the virtual realm of James Madison University. My name is Kwyn, and we are going to get started with this powerful, critical conversation with the Adrienne Maree Brown. This conversation is designed to be a point of pleasure in our day. We are grateful to witness a conversation between pleasure activists Adrienne Maree Brown and two dynamic student leaders, Jade O and Lise Briggs. This conversation serves as the nucleus of the queer resistance teach-in. The teach-in has the purpose to bring nuanced queer content to students because it's missing from the formal curriculum. Our goal is to examine our history as we live in today's fight. We believe that our activism can also be our pleasure, our rest, and our authenticity. So I'm going to read the bios of our folks today up here. We have Jade O, who is a social work major, women's gender and sexuality studies minor, and transfer student from Virginia Peninsula Community College in Hampton, Virginia. They are proudly Filipino, Japanese, Korean, and queer, and they are originally from Hawaii. Also, they really enjoy crocheting in their free time. Let's give a round of applause for Jade. Next, we have Lise Briggs. Lise is a senior health sciences and communication studies double major at JMU. She is from Richmond, Virginia. She is the president of the Black Student Alliance, as well as a member of Esteem Models. Let's give it up for Lise. Last but certainly not least, we have the Adrienne Maree Brown. Adrienne Maree Brown grows healing ideas in public through her multi-genre writing, her music, and her podcasts. Informed by 25 years of movement facilitation, somatics, Octavia E. Butler scholarship, and her work as a doula, Adrienne has nurtured emergent strategy, pleasure activism, radical imagination, and transformative justice as ideas and practices for transformation. She is the author and editor of several published texts, a co-generator of a tarot deck, and a developing musical ritual. Thank you again. So excited for this conversation. I'll give it away to Jade and Lise.
Hello.
Hey.
Oh, Lisa, thank you. There, awesome.
Yes. Hi, everybody.
Hi. So how is everyone doing? We're just, I think that's a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Got a thumbs up. Okay. Feeling good. I'm doing good. I'm feeling sweet.
Yeah, I'm admittedly a little nervous right now, but I'm trying to.
Really? Where do you feel that in your body?
It's really like in the chest, and sometimes like my stomach, but mostly the chest right now.
Yeah, I find it helps to just bring my hands, like when I'm feeling alive, just bring my hand to the place and just, I'm like, oh, this is my aliveness. Nervousness is just that. It's just being like, oh my God, I really feel alive right now. The stakes are high, higher than usual, you know? How are you, Lise?
You know, I'm very calm. I'm very zen right now. I'm just happy to be here. Yeah.
Well, so to further contextualize the teach-in, like Kwyn mentioned earlier, honestly, the whole point of it is to provide missing curriculum and highlight the interest and the need and the timeliness of this curriculum to admin at James Madison University. Because there is a lot of students here, including myself, and including Lise. Like there's a yearning for, deeper, more nuanced conversation about, queerness. And so, but knowing why we're here, can you just tell us a little bit more about pleasure activism and what that is about?
Yeah, I can. Well, before I start, I want to just commend you. One of the wisdoms from Toni Morrison is that if you don't see something in the world, you have to create it, And I feel like this teach-in is you all doing that. It's being like, oh, there's something missing and we need it. So we're going to get it. We're going to give it to ourselves. And
it's culture shifting behavior to take responsibility for your community and for your space and shift culture. So just wanting to affirm you and affirm everyone who is tuning in. Pleasure activism is rooted in the soil of Audre Lorde. So Audre Lorde was a queer Black feminist poet, writer, organizer, and she wrote this text called The Uses of the Erotic as Power. And it blew my mind the first time I read it, which is when I was in college. So I was like y'all's age. And you can hear her. I always tell people you can go look online for Audre Lorde Uses of the Erotic, and you can listen to her reading it. And I read it, and it was one of those things that like shifted something inside me that was like, it's going to take me a long time to even understand what just shifted. But she planted the seeds into my body that my natural state was not despair or self-negation or depression, but was actually this erotic aliveness. So that seed germinated and germinated and germinated in me as I was doing all kinds of movement work. I did harm reduction work with active drug users and sex workers. I did electoral organizing. I did direct action work with a group called Ruckus, where we trained people in doing civil disobedience, many of whom have gone on to do massive, beautiful acts of civil disobedience in the movement over the past decade. And inside of all of that work, I was like, we seem to be forgetting ourselves as bodies that need pleasure. We seem to be forgetting that there's a politic to our pleasure and a pleasure to our politic. And there is a politic of feeling good, like who believes that they deserve to feel good, and how do we reclaim the right if we have been oppressed, if our lineages have been oppressed, so that the norm that has been created for us is that our bodies are for labor, our bodies are for other people's uses, our bodies are to serve capital. Pleasure activism to me is a way that we reclaim our right to pleasure. And it's a way that we heal. And there's also an aspect of it that is about the processes we engage in as human beings. And I say, how do we make justice and liberation the most pleasurable activities we can be involved in as humans? Because right now they're kind of miserable. Like it's kind of miserable to like slog through accountability, you know? Mm-hmm. It's like, what would it look like? Not if it was easy, because pleasure isn't always coming from ease. It comes a lot from aliveness. It comes from feeling satisfaction. And yeah, right now it's like very unsatisfying to be a human who needs accountability and who needs to be in a community that you can trust. Mm-hmm. So all of that, right, is what the pleasure activist waters are swimming in. And there's a lot of sex and there's a lot of drugs. I'm really explicitly trying to normalize talking about these things because everyone does them or wants to do them or is trying to figure out their relationship to them in some way. And so there's a lot of sex and drugs, but there's also dance, there's laughter, there's comedy, there's fashion, there's deep friendship, there's parenting, there's, you know, aging, right? What does it mean to experience pleasure over the age of 60 when you're like, my orientation is not anymore necessarily around building a family or a career. I'm living, you know? Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of a nutshell.
Yeah, I think it's really important too to harp on like, you know, acknowledging like, you know, aromantic, asexual people, like it's not, there isn't one way to find pleasure, right? There's so many different ways that people define it. So I think
intimacy happens in so many different ways.
Yeah. So and you do address that.
The time that I'm like, when people are like, I'm trying to figure out where I fit into this spectrum of desire, desirability, relationship, safety, consent, power, and like what comes up from within. So much of the book is learning to be okay with whatever is actually arising within you, right? for the longest time, I was like, everyone wants to have sex 18 times a day, right? Like that's what everyone wants. And I have a friend who's like, I never ever want it, ever. And just being like, normalizing, like that's what arises in your body, but she wants to care and she wants to cuddle and she wants to do all these other things. And it's like, oh, yeah, that's a way of being because it exists. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So I'm glad that you brought up Audre Lorde. I saw in an interview that you said that you use the uses of erotic as pleasure, one of her essays, to really like figure out what pleasure activism was for you. And after reading, I would say that the quote that stood out to me was, "But the erotic offers a well of replenishing and provocative force to the woman who does not fear its revelation, nor succumb to the belief that sensation is enough." But my question for you is, what quote really stuck out to you to really create pleasure activism?
Yeah, I'll read it to you. Part of why I think I did this book was so that I could have this essay in a place that was always available to me. I was like, I just need it by me every single day, all the time. So there might be two.
Okay.
All right, we'll deal with it. So the first one, the erotic is a measure between the beginnings of our sense of self and the chaos of our strongest feelings. It is an internal sense of satisfaction to which, once we have experienced it, we know we can aspire. For having experienced the fullness of this depth of feeling and recognizing its power, in honor and self-respect, we can require no less of ourselves. So that piece was like, it almost kind of broke my brain a little bit when I was trying to process it, because I was like, what is this depth of feeling you're speaking about? You know, I lived a lot of my life from the neck up, and I was just like, I think really hard, and I feel from my thinking self, you know, like I get upset and I'm like, analyze that, process that, think about that. And I was like, she's definitely talking about something else. When she's talking about this depth of feeling, it's something that happens below the neck. And then this other quote, which, for when we begin to recognize our deepest feelings, we begin to give up of necessity being satisfied with suffering and self-negation and with the numbness, which so often seems like their only alternative in our society. Our acts against oppression become integral with self, motivated and powered from within. In touch with the erotic, I become less willing to accept powerlessness and the other supplied states of being which are not native to me, such as resignation, despair, self-effacement, depression, and self-denial. So I think about that all the time, because when you're doing movement work, when you're trying to change the world, I've been tripping with my friends lately because I keep being like, y'all, do you know there's just people out there like not even trying to change the world at all? Like they're just living their lives, right? I can't wrap my mind around that, right? It's been such a constant of my life. But if you are trying to change the world, you can feel that the limitation of our revolutionary efforts, the limitation of our organizing efforts, the limitation of how much we can change the world is deeply shaped by what people believe is possible, what they feel is possible, and what they've experienced. So if they're like, I've always experienced it this way, it never goes fair. The election is always stolen. The boss always shorts the pay. There's never a union that gets taken seriously. If your experiences are always, I'm going to have to deny myself and join in my own oppression to survive, right? Then you do that. And you start to shape yourself into the space that society has made available for you. And what I found in her work was the invitation to say, my existence means that the world needs to be shaped in such a way that it can accommodate all of who I am, right? This is why being queer is such a radically important aspect of our identity. It's not being like, I need your approval of how I want to fuck. That's not what's going on, right? It's absolutely saying, I exist beyond any of your binaries. I want something different and fluid from what you told me I was supposed to want. And once you experience the power, right, of just being like, this is just true. I just want what I want and I'm not alone in it. I'm meeting other people. And there's nothing, I also grew up inside of a Christian paradigm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people grow up inside of some religious paradigm, some worldview that for whatever reason has a perspective on what kind of love, what kind of relationship, what kind of gender, what kind of self-expression and desire and relationship is okay. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, having a relationship to the divine as a part of that. What I read in Audre Lorde's work allowed me for the first time to say, this thing that's moving through me that is fluid and powerful and does experience desire that I was not told I was allowed to experience, and doesn't experience gender in the ways I was told to experience it. This part of me is divine. It is the divine power of aliveness moving through me. And maybe humans have misunderstood the divine gifts that we've been given. And so we've written our books to the best of our ability. We have translated, we have written down what we received from God, what we received from the divine forces of the world. But maybe there's more to it. I read the uses of the erotic as a divine text. I read it as an invitation from Audre Lorde to return to the direct relationship with the divine, which is an honest relationship with yourself, where you say, something holy is moving through me, my breath. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. That's already enough. The whole universe conspired to give me the miracle of life as I am. Now, all I have to do is be that. Okay? And it's so satisfying to land in that place, that there's nothing to fix. There's nothing wrong with me. There's nothing to fix. And maybe nothing too wrong, right? Yeah, so that's the gift that's one of the many gifts that Audre Lorde gave us.
It's somewhat related. So I've heard you talk about like the idea of the orgasmic yes. And I think that really just resonated with me because I guess right now, I'm a transfer student, so like I'm away from my family and like trying to figure out
your first semester.
Yeah, literally my first semester.
Sweetheart, welcome to your new place.
It's been great so far, and but it's been a little bit tough, like trying to figure out what that actually means for me, and sex has not been, I just honestly haven't had time for it lately. And yet I don't feel unsatisfied with myself.
That's right.
And lately I've just been like kind of diving into stuff that I'm passionate, all my social work studies and like getting to know bell hooks and reading your stuff and just reading like all of these wonderful, like I'm actually like reading now, which has not happened before.
Yes.
And like I'm excited about it, and that has been like kind of my orgasmic yes, or like my positive obsession lately, and like using that to fulfill myself. So do you have like any more advice like about how to like navigate this journey of like finding this yes and like kind of outside of like trying to avoid like the outside pressures, maybe like family or like friends or other people in your life? So
why is family always trying to keep us from our orgasmic yes? Why they like that? I mean, I would say that what I've noticed about this is that there are so many ways to quiet your orgasmic yes, deny your orgasmic yes, and a lot of them are also yeses. So it's like when you say an unenthusiastic yes, when you say yes, that's a lie, when you say sure, I'll do that, right? And we all do this, and many of us are socialized. The polite thing, the right thing to do is to say yes because something was offered to you. And when what you feel inside you is a no. So one of the principles of pleasure activism is that your no makes the way for your yes. Learning how to really be like, if it's not an enthusiastic yes, for the reason, sometimes I'll be like, I don't really feel like going roller skating, but I'm saying an enthusiastic yes to the person that I want to go spend time with this person. And I'm like, I can say a deep yes to this person. Usually I'm trying to get to a place where I'm saying yes to the person and the activity, or the activity and the use of time, or the, listening. Like I told y'all, I have a back porch, and I'm getting it screened in. And when I moved into this house, I knew I wanted a screened in porch, and it didn't have one. And I was like, that's okay. It's okay. I'll sit out here. It's fine. I'll just sit here. And I've been sitting there for 3 years, getting eaten by mosquitoes, and just being like, this is a no, right? Like I'm like trying to have the experience of going and sitting out on the porch, but my body is like, no, like we know what's going to happen. We do this to ourselves all the time. And I think for some of us, the starting place is actually to just notice, if you can, inside yourself, is this a yes or a no? Like, leave the enthusiasm out of it, leave the orgasm out of it. Is this a real yes or a real no? And then once I know that, can I say which one it is? Mm. Do I feel comfortable in this connection telling the truth? Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. If you're in connections where you don't feel comfortable saying no, run, but like, that's not necessarily a healthy relationship. It either needs to transform or end. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. Because there are a lot of people in your life. There will be a lot of people in your life who can hear your yes, who can hear your no, who can honor it, who can work with you to figure out the boundary of it. But first you have to be able to do that to yourself. Like, you can't ask other people to give you things that you're not in any way practicing within yourself, because then even if they give you that, here's your orgasmic yes porch, something you will self-sabotage, right? Mm-hmm. Because in you maybe are like, I don't deserve this, right? And I'll tell you something, orgasms can also teach you a lot about this. Self-pleasure can teach you a lot about this. I think there's a lot to be learned about how the sense of satisfaction cannot come if you are trying to perform it for someone else, right? It has to come because you're like, I am feeling something within myself. Now that feeling might be, I like how this other person is experiencing me, but it has to be something that you're feeling within yourself. The same thing for any decision you make. It's like, I know this will please you, but will it please me? Mm. Okay. And then once you get your whole life into the place where you're like, okay, this is yes, then you can start to be like, okay, now let's go for the orgasmic yeses. Let's go for the ones where as soon as someone says, do you want to be a part of this conversation? You're like, oh, hell yeah, that's where I want to be. That's what I want to spend my time on. Or someone's like, have you heard of this book? And you're like, oh, I didn't know it existed, and now I'm about to spend the whole weekend buried in it, right? That I think is the fine tuning. And I think having a lot of compassion for yourself, because we are a generational curse breaking era, right? Mm-hmm. There's like 3 or 4 generations of us now who are like, all the stuff you taught us, we rejected. All the stuff. We're not being polite. We're not waiting our turn. We're not doing patriarchy. You can't hold us back because of some aspect of our identity. We're not doing it. And right now you see the legislation, the policy trying to reverse that, or trying to keep Pandora's box closed. Keep it closed. You can't, it's too late. We already can see that we're so much more than oppression would let us be. The orgasmic yes for many of us is just saying, I exist. You cannot legislate me out of existence. Every day walking around just being like, I'm a queer, Black, fat, disabled person who is happy. Like, I'm like, you can't really mess with any of that. Like, you can't legislate me out of existence. I will still be here, even if your laws don't have words for me. So. Mm-hmm.
I'll let that sit for a sec.
Yeah. That was good. That was good. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So kind of just, keeping on with that track.
Yeah.
How do you navigate like pleasure and having principles? So, there's outside principles, there's outside forces where it's like, oh, you're a hoe, you're a whore. If you like experience this pleasure, if you like this, then you're this. How do you navigate that within yourself, but also within society? Like, how do you figure out, okay, this is what I like, this is what I want to do?
Yes.
And how do you just navigate going through yourself and being like, okay, this might not match exactly what the morals my mother taught me, or
Totally.
what my family taught me, or this might not go with what the community wants me to do. How do I get out of my head so much to go after my pleasure?
I love this question. And I'm going to answer it from a couple of different directions. The first direction is, I'm going to give homework to anyone who's struggling with this, is to take the language that is being used against you, hoe, whore, whatever it is, and look in the mirror and be like, I'm a whore and I love it. I'm a hoe and I'm having a great time. I'm a faggot. It's fucking great. I'm a dyke, lesbian, munch mouth eater, whatever it is, right? Just take it and just be like, but is it fun though? Am I having a great time? Right? Am I living my best life? Like, right? Just try it on. Just try it on, saying it to yourself and being like, is it possible at this time for me to actually reclaim this? Liberate it from being a curse upon my name. Claim it as being a blessing, right? Because sometimes that stuff is rooted in jealousy. I'm like, don't be mad at me because I'm having all the pleasure that you have not given yourself access to. You can call me whatever you want to. The orgasms are bang, bang. I'm having a great life. And I don't think that in the design of humanity, we were wired for pleasure we weren't meant to experience, right? So just scientifically, everything about how our bodies are created indicates that we are doing the right thing when we activate our pleasure centers in our body. So that's the first way. The second way I would come at it is to think about, throughout time and space, the people who have called others names and the people who have been called names. Think about which side of history you want to be on inside of that, right? I'd always rather be on the side of the people who are called. I'm like, you want to call me a witch? You want to call me a hoe? You want to call me queer? You want to call me negroid? You know, I'm like, there's nothing wrong with any of those things, right? So really looking at, and maybe picking an ancestor who helps to ground you in this, right? Just being like, let me just call on Josephine Baker. Let me call on Eartha Kitt. Let me call on folks who enjoyed pleasure and enjoy their bodies and enjoy their power and their time. Let me call on Audre Lorde, right? Let me call on Samuel R. Delany. Samuel R. Delany is one of my favorite hosts. This was a gay Black man who writes science fiction, sci-fi essays, some of the most imaginative world building you'll ever see. But one of my favorite pieces of writing of his is an essay in which he talks about being a hoe and how he was like, I've had thousands of lovers, like thousands, because I was so interested in all the different bodies and all the different sensations. And I wanted to know it all, you know? And, you know, you don't have to aim for thousands, but it is interesting to be like, well, what if that worldview is just wrong, right? Now, that's the second way. The third way is to think about your relationship with the people who shame you. Really go directly to that place and be like, you know, is there something that can transform in the relationship that you have, for instance, with a mother who has different values, right? A relationship that allows something else to become possible. When I wrote Pleasure Activism, I wasn't thinking about my parents. I didn't think about them reading it. I was like, squirt, 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 nipple, nipple. You know, I definitely was not like, my mom's going to read this, you know. But my mom did read it. And it has transformed our relationship and our conversations, because she is also a person in a body. She is also a woman in a body. And it's for humans that we do this work, right? So I think there's a way to approach the conversation with those who would shame you that is like, what shaped your relationship to your body? How do you feel about your body, right? I feel really good in my body when I'm doing these behaviors. I feel really good in my body in these consensual, positive, you know, affirming encounters, right? I think sometimes we get stuck on the judgment that's coming from people, and it's designed to control us, but really that person is telling you the story of their own control. What is controlling them, right? And I'm like, oh, that's controlling you. That's not controlling me. Do you want to talk about it? For you, right? Did someone make you feel like a hoe for having desire? You know, I'm not taking that on for you. But is there something for you in that? And depending on the relationship you have with those folks, it could be a family therapy moment. It could unlock that there's abuse. You know, so much of people's negative orientation towards these things is in a culture of repressing desire.
Mm-hmm.
You create secrecy, you create toxic loops, you create spaces where people are like, I don't know where to get my needs met. And we live in a society of rampant sexual assault of women, of children, of boys, of men, of elders, like indigenous women. It's everywhere you turn. It's very rare to meet people who have not experienced that. So much so that it's like, to say trigger, I'm like, it's all of us in some way who are touched by this epidemic, pandemic, beyondemic, right? Yeah. So I also think to notice, I'm like, oh, what's coming up? What's actually coming up? Is it rooted in pain? Can we talk about the pain instead? Can we talk about the desire to shame? Right. I took somatics. I've studied somatics for a long time, which is really a study of the body and its wholeness. And we study shame as a part of that. And one of the things we learn is that shame is designed to keep us from some of the biggest, deepest, scariest emotions. Because shame makes us feel so embarrassed that we just pop kind of back up in our heads. It's just like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Instead of, what's under this shame that I feel like I don't deserve to exist? Right? My grandfather, I'll say this and this is the last thing. My grandparents, when I came out to them, I didn't come out to them in the most ideal way. I was tripping on acid and I wrote them a letter that told them that I like to have sex with all genders. So, wouldn't recommend that method, but it was effective in letting them know who I was and that I wanted them to know who I was. And I was able to really sit down with my grandfather before his passing and reckon with him, and talk with him. And it was so interesting to see that it was like, this is something that is shifting from your generation to my generation. But your concern, even your judgment and your shaming of me is rooted in what you think is your divine love of me. You think by shaming me, you're somehow advocating to get me into heaven. And I'm like, can I receive the love that is inside of your attention? And can I set the boundaries that, you can just say, I love you. You can just say, I'm praying for you. I can, you might be trying to pray something away that's not going anywhere, but you can just say you're praying for me, you love me. Yeah. So those are some options in the soup.
Yeah, that, like, having empathy, especially for, like, my parents, where they've done things that have hurted me and made me feel like I'm lesser than, like, that is something I've been trying to figure out lately, is like, how do I find ways to, humanize them and remember, like, there's still people too at the end of the day, even though
they're people, and it's learned behavior, right? Like, you look at children don't care about gender, they don't care about sexuality, they don't really care how people look, they don't care about any of that. They're just like, can you play or not? Like, what's up? We learn all of this other stuff that people are right or wrong, and that it's up to us to determine that. I'm always like, if you're not causing anybody harm, do your thing. And if you are causing harm and it's consensual, do your thing. You know what I mean? It's a big wide world out there. There's a lot of things, but I have had to learn that. And that feels like one of the lessons from my adulthood, is like, oh, my parents are people. And they were pretty young when they were trying to parent me and set values. So they were working from the values that they had in their 20s. I'm like, values change over time. Now in my 40s, I'm like, my values are very different than they were in my 20s. They're more radical, because I'm like, oh, I can set them more myself. And all you're saying to your parents is like, I'm setting a value for myself here. It's different from yours, but I respect you. I love you. I just have a different path.
Yeah, like something a little off topic-ish. just to give you some context. So at JMU, past couple of weeks, we've had a few concerning things happen. 2 weeks ago, we had a KKK affiliate group pass through and posted like leaflets that just hatred, just.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
But it was outside of the community, so that happened. And then last week we had LGBTQIA pamphlets on professors' doors, and just a lot of confusion, fear, hurt that's being felt, especially for me and especially for like a lot of students who are, within these groups. So I wanted to ask, Lisa and I are both, student leaders, and we love and are passionate about, advocating and speaking out for our people and for each other. So what are the best ways to like encourage solidarity building, and like how do we address these institutional issues as students?
It's a good question. I mean, I think one of the first things is having a way for the community to come together when things like that happen, and having a circle to hear, process, support each other, to grieve a little bit. Because when something like that happens, it's like we've lost some sense of innocence. We've lost some sense of safety. We've lost a sense of, especially at campus, a lot of times it's like, oh, we're a thing. Like, oh, but we're not outside of the world. The world is, we're only ever a microcosm of the whole. And so the whole is always right there, knocking, banging, knocking through. But taking the time to just, offer, right? Let's come together and let's talk about this. Give people a chance to talk in pairs. Give people a chance to talk in small groups. Not everyone wants to get up in front of a whole group. But give people a chance to talk and to feel, how does it feel that the KKK feels like they can come roll through here? How does it feel that these anti-LGBTQ people think that they can come here? How have we as a community shored up our boundaries and our banks? Like how are we shored up? And maybe where are we not shored up? Are there things we need to attend to as a community? But I think that first piece is just really listening and feeling it together. This happened to us, so that people aren't sitting in isolation as if it happened to each person individually and they have to handle it individually. I think really encouraging people that if you need trauma support, to, that there's therapy, that there are counselors, that there's folks to actually talk to who can hold it. Because sometimes it's like the incident unveils or opens up memories of a lot of other incidents. Sometimes it's like, oh, this is my first time experiencing something this jarring. But for a lot of us, it's like, this is reminding me of, right? And so it's like, how do we attend to the part of us that's inside of time and beyond it? And then I think there's a real need in this time to have security culture and to talk about security culture. So, probably your campus is already talking about this. Maybe all, students groups are already talking about this. But if you're not, that is a really big pragmatic thing you can do, is like, if something like this happens on our campus, how are we as students developed to respond to it? Do we know de-escalation tactics? Do we know protection tactics? Do we know, how to make it harder for someone if they're trying to cause harm to someone in our circle? Do we know when to, be a force of opposition and when to actually be moving ourselves as far as we can away from it, right? I think that, we live in this weird culture now where it's like more people are getting trained in dealing with an active shooter than like an incident like this, right? Where it's like, well, this feels like a precursor to the active shooter moment.
Yes.
It's culturally laying the groundwork for that, of saying, we can violate this space. We can come here whenever we want and do whatever we want. And so I'm like, to me, I'm like, we need to learn how to meet this thing and be like, you actually can't come here. We are paying attention. We do see what's happening, and we have a culture where we keep each other safe, right? really investing time and energy into that, I think for all humans right now is necessary, but especially when you have that kind of a campus space where it's like, this is something that the institution could actually roll out and support.
I think that has been a major frustration for me and for many other people. I know Lisa and I talked about this as like student, like we as students did not hear anything about, no formal nothing. So at least that I'm aware of. And we had a petition go out, and we I will applaud, like we have many faculty and professors and staff that have been really great about informing students, sharing information, giving spaces to talk about what has happened.
You know if they're organized? Like, do they have a group, or are they coming together to share and talk and develop?
I do know about we have like a volunteer-based LGBT like Q friendly space for staff. It's called Safe Space or Safe Zone. I mean, I believe like that there's a lot of facilitating amongst them. But otherwise, like we've requested like measures to be taken, and so that's all.
Well, and this is the thing, right? Because I will also say institutions, part of what it means to become an institution is to sort of get set in a particular way of being. And there's great benefits from that. And then there's weaknesses. There's places where it's like, oh, now inside this bureaucracy, do we even know who responds to this, right? Something that you can do as a student body is you can create demands and requests and even invitations of like, we would like to know which office in the school holds this. We would like to know, who is talking and thinking about a security plan for us and a security culture for this space. We would like to know, right? Because even if they don't have it, then it's like, get it. We would like to know that it exists. And if it doesn't, we would like to ask for it to exist. And we're willing to work with you, right? If there's people in the student body who are working on this already, work on it, get resourced to work on it, right? To spend time with folks. I don't think it would be an exaggeration of resources or priority to actually create a group that's like, a task force that is figuring this out for the university. That is like, we've got interested faculty and we've got interested students. There's probably a few admin who are also like, we understand what could make this work. Task force it, right? And let it become a part of your culture. When I was an undergrad, I was at Columbia University. And the thing that started while I was there was a group called SAFER, which is now all over the country, all over the world. It was like, oh, there's a rape culture that is everywhere. And there's nothing right now structurally built in to address this. And that's changed greatly. So now there's a lot of policy, a lot of legislation, a lot of other stuff at that campus and in other places that becomes a way that stuff is working, right? Sometimes you are the first one, or sometimes you're at the beginning of developing the model of success. And there's also pleasure in that, right? There's also pleasure in being like, wait, we could figure out how to do this. And it could be something that, because we're all so in touch with each other now, that the hive mind becomes possible. Like if we learn to do it here, we could offer this to other students who are also dealing with this kind of hyper-aggressive right-wing onslaught that's happening. It's happening everywhere, right? And campuses are super susceptible because there's no general sense of how anything operates. It's like each one is a little different situation. But yeah, I hope that's useful.
Thank you.
5 more minutes, but at least, Jenny, please don't give any more questions.
Yes. I have this one question that I really, really, really need to get off my chest.
Okay.
So, the quote, that's that white people shit? Yeah. Do you think that's jealousy from the Black community that came along after seeing that white people can make mistakes and enjoy themselves in life, thoroughly living in pleasure? Because as I was reading what you were talking about, and I was reading your interviews, that quote just kept coming to my mind of that's that white people shit, because they can enjoy everything in life. But when it comes to me, I have to like stop at a certain point. Like I can't say that I want to go on a hike because that's that white people shit. Even
Right.
though I genuinely think that I would like get pleasure from that because I like the outdoors. I like
Yeah.
to work out and all that stuff. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, what's one of the things that's always fascinating to me, I learn a lot from the sci-fi scholar Octavia Butler. One of the things she always talked about was like, anything I'm doing that I'm doing as a Black person is human shit. That's that human shit, right?
Mm.
So that might be something to try on in your head when you think that's that white people shit. It's like, actually, no, that's that human shit that so far, because of white supremacy and capitalism, has only been afforded to white people. But it's actually that human shit because race is a construct. It's not a biological reality. It is something that has only been used as a way to oppress. It's real because we live inside of it, right? It's real because it has economic impacts, because it has cultural and social impacts, that we're trying to survive it. But, and I say this as a mixed person, I have a white mother and a Black father. I'm like, having grown up around both families, I'm like, there's nothing that is not that human shit. There's nothing, right? I grew up around white people who, really thought that a lot of the activities, getting pregnant before marriage, doing drugs, getting arrested, all that shit, that was that Black people shit. And it all happened on the white side of the family. Right? And I grew up with Black family who had ideas around, that were mostly actually rooted in class. They were like, oh, that's that white people shit. But really it's like, no, it's like once you have means to travel, once you have means and safety, everyone travels. The world is made up of nomadic peoples of all backgrounds, right? So for me, one of the reasons I have chosen to root all of my work in Black feminist like lineages is because I get really interested. Like what you just said it's so interesting to me that something like a hike, for instance, can still feel like that's that white people shit, even though Black feminists have been hiking and being outside and being in nature. Harriet Tubman was a hiker. Okay? That's like
Probably the
Harriet
best
Tubman,
hiker.
right? She's the best hiker of all history. Okay? But I do think there's beautiful books on this about being Black in nature and being Black in relationship to nature. And I think it would be worth, the question, what I hear inside the question is, as a Black person, who gives me permission to access all the pleasures of my humanity, right? And how do you stop shutting yourself down or cutting yourself out of it because you are saying it only belongs to some people who have oppressed me, so it can't be mine also, right? But every time I'm in the woods, every time I take it to the forest, every time I take it to the ocean, what I feel is there was never anything lesser about me. There was never anything about me that the earth saw as wanting or needing. The earth thinks I'm just perfect. The earth thinks I'm part of the whole circle of life, right? And it's really good for my system to remember that and bring that back into a world which doesn't see things that way, which tries to diminish me. I love walking up in someone's face when I've just spent a week in the ocean. And I'm like, you think you're superior to me, the child of the ocean? Bring it. Come on. Let's see what you have. It cannot even touch the depth of my experience, right? And I was very intentional with pleasure activism to include almost all Black and brown writers, right? Almost every single person in that book is a Black writer, brown writer, Latinx writer. That was intentional also because I wanted to give people a guidebook that is written by people who look like us and live lives like us. And because then I'm like, who you see doing it really does matter, right? There's a Black group that is Black and biking, and they take these bike tours all up and down the East Coast. They probably come up where you are.
Yeah.
Black folks are farming and composting. Black folks are homesteading land. Black folks are, I mean, right now I've got a whole bunch of Black people who are putting a herb garden in my backyard. You know, there's nothing that we're not doing. We're wearing Birkenstocks, you know, we're wearing shorts outside in the wintertime. I mean, there's nothing that we're not doing. Some of us, and not everyone uses a washcloth. It's just these ideas of like, I will say this. I don't ever think that there's jealousy in the way that we understand jealousy. I think what it is trying to heal the pain of the power dynamic that we have lived inside of. So it's like the power dynamic is so painful to grow up in a space where everyone is treating you like lesser than for something over which you had no control, that as soon as you get the capacity to flip the script and be like, yeah, that's why white folks dirty. That's why, right? Whatever it is, there's something in there. It's like, I'm just trying to heal this wound. I'm just trying to rebalance this power. And I find, you know, the pettiness is one way to do it. Mm-hmm. I find it much more powerful for me to just actually reclaim the humanity, right? I'm just like, I feel like I wouldn't wish whiteness on my worst enemy. I wouldn't wish being a man on anyone I loved. Right? Because of the weight of the construct that you have to carry and the weight of the construct that you're thus having to free your soul from in your lifetime. Like that's the work of oppressors, is to free their soul from the work of oppression. That's heavy. Mm-hmm. That's heavy, right? Next to that, I'm like, my road is actually quite easy. I have to reclaim pleasure. I have to reclaim my access to my power. I'm really happy that this is my work.
Yeah.
Right? If anything, people should be jealous of me. Yeah.
And they are.
Yeah, I'm always telling people, I'm like, I'm the freest, happiest Black person, you know, so, and person, period. Like I meet white people all the time and I'm like, I know it's you're sad and I know it's a struggle right now. And this is the gift that you got for your lifetime. Right? This is the gift that I got for mine. We all have different work to do. Yeah.
Well, I think that is our time.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank y'all.
From the bottom of our hearts. Thank you.
Yeah, thank y'all so much. Thanks for having me.
I could talk forever, but
yeah, keep talking, keep spreading the ideas. Y'all are the ideas now.
Well, thank you so much.
Bye, loves.
Bye.
Bye.
Y'all did great.
Oh my God.
We resistance teaching. Pew, 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 pew. Bye, everybody.
Bye.